We are slowly coming to our closing today, but we have a wonderful final panel first. So the creative climate movement is a very vibrant space that we can't hope to capture in a single day. But we do have a few more quick fire provocations or in conversation for people to really share their stories of action and their creativity in response to this climate and environmental crisis. So, first of all, I am going to hand back over to Sam Lee.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to start this session off by introducing the next artist, Cosmo Sheldrake, a name that's probably familiar to many of you as a pioneering sound artist, electronic and acoustic musician, but an artist who will claim that the sounds of nature are probably the most sort of important part of his practice and explorations, and he's a real forager of sound, but somebody who's deeply fascinated by the science and the ecology of the world entirely. And what you're going to hear for the next few minutes is a journey into some of his discoveries and some of the incredible sound archives and collections of our natural world. Please put your hands together for Cosmo Sheldrake.
Much. Oh, thank you, Sam. So I'm going to play a piece of music. I'm going to improvise using sounds of endangered British birdsong. But I'm just going to introduce you to some of the birds before I do. It's a small, there's so many that this is not even a scratch. But this is a bittern. By putting it in a sampler, it slows and speeds it up so it can be played on a keyboard. This is a cuckoo. Take some of the effects off. This is a nightingale, which I actually recorded at one of Sam's Nightingale, Singing with Nightingale events in Kent. And I took different extracts of the same song and spread them out over a keyboard. So that's all. So you can kind of play a chord of nightingales. It's another nightingale. It's the short-eared owl on the bass. It's a robin, which is not endangered, but it's one of my favorites. Another robin. The short-eared owl. Tawny owl. Marsh warbler. Ring ouzel. Anyway, there's more, but I best get cracking. So I'm going to improvise you a tune out of some of these birds. Thank you. I'm also going to play a little tune now made out of recordings of fish that live in coral reef environment and also some whales. And I'm just going to introduce briefly a couple of those sounds. And also I'm going to sneak in a little recording of a mushroom. This is a recording of made from the 70s of a guy who used the same technology that we study human brains and nerves to record an action response in a fungi. So this is a oyster mushroom mycelial network being monitored as it's fed a block of wood. So it's been very excited. I mean, this is not the full recording, but I just made it into a kick drum. So that's an action potential from an oyster mushroom being fed. So I'm just going to introduce a couple of these. So some of the sounds I have here are some recordings that were made by a couple of fish ecologists called Timothy Gordon and Steve Simpson. And they've been doing this amazing stuff where they've been what they call acoustic enrichment, where they play the sounds of healthy coral reefs to dying coral reefs, which in turn encourages the fish to come back, because the sound of the healthy coral reef is obviously more inviting than a bleached reef. The fish come back, start grazing on the algae. The algae stops smothering the polyps, and the coral can return to life. So these are recordings of their acoustic enrichment projects in Indonesia. This is actually a degraded reef. It's quite quiet, so you might have to... And then this is a recording of a restored reef. But these are taken over a long period. It won't tell too much difference just because they fluctuate dramatically during periods of the day. But these are both evening choruses on the coral reef. Coral reefs also have dawn choruses and evening choruses where everyone comes out and sings. Anyway, so that's there's some recordings of some acoustic enrichment projects from these Indonesia studies they've done. This is a longhorn sculpin. And these fish make sounds by forcing water out of their swim bladders, which is how they regulate their height. This is a blue whale. These drums, this is an oyster toadfish, and these drums were recorded by the American military during the Cold War, so they could distinguish between Soviet submarines and fish. This is an oyster toadfish and a buck-tooth parrotfish, which goes around chewing coral reef with its beak. Another longhorn sculpin. Humpback whale. Sperm whale echolocating, which makes sounds so loudly that they could actually kill a human being. And the person who recorded these had his entire arm stunned for about 4 hours by one of the sperm whales that came up to him and echolocated him. I'll just introduce one more sound because I'm obviously going to run out of time. But this is a humpback whale, which I've turned into a choir of humpback whales. So there's one humpback whale, then I've got these 3 more here that I can layer in and out. So I've got a small choir of humpbacks. Right, I'm going to improvise a short piece of music using some of these sounds.
Thank you so much, Cosmo. And now I'd love to welcome to the stage Jamie Oborne, manager of the 1975, who will be joined by Julie's Bicycle's own Chiara Badiali.
We'll have to take turns until Alfredo maybe figures out that we've switched to the handhelds. But if not, hi Jamie.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Jamie manages the 1975, at the moment one of the biggest bands in the world, and is also founder of Dirty Hit record label. So we have asked Jamie to speak briefly about sort of what was your personal epiphany moment, I think, as a band manager and also as a record label founder, realising that you had to start taking action on climate change.
So I think, obviously I've been aware of climate conversations probably for the last decade or so, like everyone else here. I think the first half of last year, I found myself like becoming really kind of, like for want of a better word, like kind of depressed about, the state of politics and the direction that I felt, like our sort of heavily commercialized society was going in, and I think personally, like I reached a real low point, and I have two like quite young children who this is very much like a part of their like daily experience, the climate crisis, and my daughter, and like my sort of selfish fear for her future, I think was perhaps like the biggest sort of like motivational sort of wake up, and I do manage 1975, and I feel very, very blessed in my like business life to have such incredible clients, and I have this incredible record label and employ like really like amazing people, and I was talking to Matthew, who's the singer in the band, about he has like a kind of a like previous for wanting to champion things and using his platform for what he perceives to be like good, and honestly I think it's for him, I think it's his way of kind of making sense of his life a little bit. I think it kind of makes it seem like more kind of like this makes the sacrifices seem a little bit more bearable, and helps him make sense of his position, which I don't mean that in a kind of like a moany like hard done by way. I just mean like in a practical sense, I feel him like making sense of his life by giving a platform to people and causes. And we were in my office, and we were talking about what's the most important cause in the world, and because of the way I'd been feeling, I was very much like, well, it's the environment, and we were talking about wanting to give someone a platform, and we both agreed that Greta Thunberg was perhaps like the most important person on the planet on that level. So I bizarrely kind of like got in touch with her father through an environmental journalist, and over the time that's passed, forged a little bit of a relationship with them, and we ended up like collaborating on a track, and I think when I met her, I was like most people, I was kind of like blown away by her sort of steadfast, belief that things can and that have to change, and I remember I was talking to her father while she was recording with Matthew, and I was saying like how commenting on how proud he must be of her, and it was really strange because he was like, yeah, like loads of people say that to me, but honestly, like my daughter is, she's been quite sort of like, she'd been depressed for like the longest time and unable to really operate, and that this had given her like purpose in life, and I just felt like it was such a kind of, I don't know, it was such like a human thing, do you know what I mean? And it really sort of inspired me to I feel that with my own children, and it made me want to just, make some sort of effort to affect, some sort of positive change, I guess.
I think that's about 3 times in that story that we've touched on this importance of action really feeding purpose and making us feel like we are able to do something when the weight of what's happening can sort of feel like it's constraining and sort of bearing down on us. Just wrapping up shortly, but obviously there is a huge amount at stake sometimes when you're as in the public eye as the 1975 are, and it's been amazing to watch all of you sort of weather the storm and also the responses. I think that not just the Greta track, but also generally speaking out has come with. What would be your advice and what's it felt like? Because it's felt like you've all been very steadfast in your convictions, and what advice would you give to someone else who would find themselves in that position?
Well, firstly, I found it bizarre, actually, to start with, that we could be so attacked for having such a pure kind of motive. Do you know what I mean? And it was funny, actually, because Svante, Greta's father, said to me while we were doing it, "Oh, you guys are really brave." And I was quite puzzled. And later that evening, when we were in Stockholm, Matthew and I had dinner, and I was saying to him, "Oh, did you hear him say that?" And we both kind of agreed that he was quite paranoid, but we were actually quite naive. And subsequently, what I've experienced the most is, this, a lot of right-leaning media has really kind of sought the opportunity to kind of undermine what we do, and the biggest thing I think that in the creative arts that we face is this notion of being hypocritical, and for me, there was in particular one MP wrote me a letter and published it weirdly in a sort of clickbait fashion, I mean, first of all, I don't really care what this person thinks, honestly, but the bigger part of it is, I feel like, we've, on this planet, there's so much apathy and such resistance to sort of kind of evolve, and I kind of feel like I'd rather be called a hypocrite than be another person who doesn't do anything and waits for someone else to, make a change. Do you know what I mean? And it was funny, and I'll end with this. I saw that when I'm really nervous. I hate this shit. And I saw earlier on there it is. It was that statement really sort of made me feel much more comfortable. We make tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like if we don't kind of, if no one makes any effort, then nothing's going to happen. Well, actually, a lot's going to happen, but none of it's going to be particularly pleasant.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jamie. Let's give Jamie a massive round of applause. And thank you. Next up, I would love to welcome an artist and activist to the stage who was unable to join an earlier panel, but we want to make sure that his voice gets heard as part of today. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Drillminister. Yeah, and just before I hand over to him completely, some of you might have seen the video for his track Choke over lunch because we were screening it in the Education Centre, so thanks.
Hello. Oh, this still ain't working still. Oh yeah, it's on. As you can see, usually someone from my background isn't really caring about the climate, but climate concerns us all. And it first came to my attention a few years ago. I heard about little Ella Kisser Deborah. Someone had approached me, and I get a lot of messages about a lot of different political things because of what I'm involved with. But this particular incident really struck a chord with me because she was only 9 years old. And for them to do an autopsy and find out that she had died by actual air pollution, it no longer became a buzzword in the news for me. It was no longer just something that's just said climate and there's people protesting and you don't know what they're doing and they're just looking crazy on TV. It was looking serious to me because an actual person had been struck down and it was an innocent life. And then I realized how much we're kind of taking things for granted, but obviously when you're talking to especially young people about this particular subject, people don't know what they're going to eat next week. So telling people about climate seems so far removed from their reality. Like, people are caring about universal credit. People are caring about so many different things that's going on in their world. To tell them about climate and how it's going to affect us all is very, very hard. So I could only do it one way that I felt it would work, especially from my background. So I made a collaboration with the central office, but the central people or the copy, I made a collaboration with them. And more or less it was for the fact of trying to highlight the situation. I didn't know it was going to go worldwide viral. I didn't know that I was going to get invited on the news to talk about it. I didn't know the seriousness of it until the feedback from the people. I had people from the American government and people, Democratic leaders from America messaging me because they were like, "Raw, this is really brave. We've seen on your national stations that you're talking about this. You're like, we think you're the first rapper in the world to talk about this, blah, blah, blah." I didn't really think that deep into it, but obviously I had to look at the news a bit deeper and realize, Trump's not actually endorsing this. He's not endorsing that this actually exists. So the Democratic people that were getting at me from America, they were probably shocked that what are we doing about it in our country? But unfortunately, someone had already died in the capital in our country. So we were already a bit too late to save that one life. But obviously, a lot of you probably don't know, but that's why I'm running for London Mayor. I'm running for London Mayor currently, right now. I'm number 3 out of all the candidates, or out of all 13 candidates right now. And it's very surprising. I'm the ballied up guy. I shouldn't be number 3. But I am number 3 because my policies and what I stand for is a lot more powerful than me having a physical face for you to identify me by. It strikes a lot of core with a lot of people because I want to make the buses of London electric if possible, or hydrogen, to try stem a lot of this bullshit that we've got going on around the schools, where we're kind of like we're basically killing our children with a lot of the way that we've got the traffic going on right now. On top of that, I want to try to encourage local councils to try to do some trams if possible. A lot more trams where it's needed for transport for people. People still need to get around, but we just need to try to look at the emissions and look at what we're doing. On top of that, I want to do a plant for plant situation where I encourage all primary schools and secondary schools to start planting. Instead of metal fences, let's have some great hedges that grow over the next 15 years. Try to put a bit more green inside of the schools and try to implement more of an allotment type of mentality with the children. Try to get people to grow veg and grow stuff and encourage people that, just growing stuff and organic is more or less the way we should be trying to go forward. And then maybe we can't change the mentality of the person that's maybe 45 right now or maybe 55 right now, because they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we can definitely teach the 5-year-old right now that doesn't have an estimation of what the world is or where it's going to go, what they can do. And we definitely can change, like my man said. Well, you man took it off for me, yeah? I'm not that special. You took off the tomorrow thing for me, yeah? Listen, if we can change tomorrow, then we definitely got an opportunity. Like I said, especially coming from where I'm coming from, this is to a lot of people in their mind, this is the least of their worries, isn't it? But this is not the least of their worries. This is probably one of the most major worries that we have. And the reason for that being, we can argue about, when it comes to politics, the left or the right or whatever we want to say, but the reality of it is, the arguing left or right is not going to resolve what's going up in the sky right now. And it's not going to save our future children or our grandchildren or help us to have a better future that enables us to know that we're going to grow up in nice environments. So when I collaborated with the central office of I've forgotten the name, you know, but when I've collaborated with them, when I collaborated with them, it's because they own a website called addresspollution.org. Addresspollution.org allows you to test what the nitrogen dioxide levels are at your address. So you type in your postcode on www.addresspollution.org and you're able to see the nitrogen dioxide levels on your road. The reason why I backed this bid and the reason why I was part of this movement and this initiative is because we realized that the government doesn't really act when you do like you can do the Extension Rebellion thing and chain yourself up to a wall or something, but that ain't changing nothing anytime soon. People only care about one thing in this world, and that's money. So when you affect the government's money or you affect how they're going to make money, this now becomes a national concern. So why I back this initiative is because when people are checking the nitrogen dioxide levels in their area, it now affects the housing market. Because we're forcing for the housing market and all of those that are doing leasing or whether they're doing buying and selling to put on the market the nitrogen dioxide levels of what you're selling. This now affects your sales. Because if you've got a house that's maybe in Kensington or you got a house that's maybe somewhere in Knightsbridge, you know that the nitrogen dioxide levels of that house are going to be in grade 1. That means it's going to be very hard for you to sell that home once someone realizes how toxic it actually is. And this is the only thing that unfortunately made the government want to react or when the government want to do anything. So I just want to close on the factor of if you want to hit them where it hurts and you want to make a change, figure out how to affect the government's money. Figure out how to affect how they're actually going to see themselves making a profit, and then we can actually hit them where it hurts, because hitting them where it hurts makes change, unfortunately. And now I'll just close on that, man.
Massive thank you to Drillminister. And now I would like to welcome to the stage Farhana Yamin, veteran UN negotiator and climate activist. Farhana.
Well, it's hard to follow that, but I'll try. And I'm just going to speak for a few minutes about my life as a climate lawyer. And I still find these stages a bit difficult because I'm not that used to speaking publicly about my life and my story. But I have been involved in the climate change negotiations at the UN since 1991, almost as soon as I qualified as a climate lawyer. And I've been to nearly every single COP, except for 2, since 1995, including the very first COP, which was in Berlin, when Angela Merkel was the environment minister of Germany, actually, and Germany wasn't even united, so, you know, a long time ago. I guess I've come to the conclusion that the COPs are really, really important. COP stands for basically the Conference of the Parties, and we're going to have the 26th one in Glasgow and possibly a bit of it in London, depending on, you know, if leaders are involved, I think. And this particular one is very significant because it's really the update of the national targets which all countries signed up to in Paris, and they agreed that they would update them on a sort of 5-yearly basis. This particular update is so important because it's this decade of reductions that really counts. If we miss this decade in terms of emission reductions, we are well and truly off the pathway of the well below 2 degrees and the 1.5 degree temperature limit that scientists have said is really important. And Paris was agreed, the Paris Agreement was agreed in 2015 with these national plans called NDCs. You know, I guess I'm a lawyer, I still use all these acronyms. But these national plans were totally inadequate when we adopted Paris and when they were tabled in Paris. So the hope and the expectation back in 2015 was that we would ramp up ambition and that somehow we would make good the past decades of inaction, what hadn't been achieved, and we would accelerate, you know, as a result of all the technologies, renewable technologies, battery storage, you know, electric vehicles. All of these things are actually fabulously available and much cheaper than fossil fuels. And the expectation was that we would use these years to make good on what we had not been able to achieve. That basically hasn't happened, and that triggered in me a very deep depression, actually, in 2017. We also then had, in the middle of the COP22, which was just after Paris was agreed, the announcement that the US election had been won by Trump, and actually on the day after, we were all on red alert, thinking that Trump would announce a withdrawal from Paris, even though he wasn't president, that he would tweet it that day. So I think that the pathways and the models that we created, legal models that we created for ambition, are really way off track, and we really need to be much more real about that. And that is why, actually, I decided in 2018, at the end of 2018, to join Extinction Rebellion. I felt that it was more important for me, frankly, to stand up and say the system wasn't working. The legal systems of the world weren't working. The legal systems I'd spent 30 years creating and taking part in. The political systems that we put our faith in were not working. They weren't taking into account the needs of people all over the planet for whom the current system doesn't deliver at all. And they weren't taking into account future generations. They weren't listening to scientists. They weren't listening to economists, normal economists. All these economics reports that I've been telling my students to read, that I read, that I've taken part in the IPCC reports, they all say things like, climate action is justifiable, even on the current metrics that we use, GDP and all the rest of it. It costs 1 to 2% of GDP, and we should do all this action. And it's a win-win to cut pollution, to insulate better houses, to have better transport systems. And the thing is that, that is happening to a degree, but not fast enough and not at the scale that is needed. And why isn't that happening? Why is it someone, boring and who's been very much an insider decided that, we need to do something radical? And essentially it's because vested interests, hugely influential, with deep, deep pockets, the fossil fuel industry, the agribusiness industry in particular, have basically captured state power. They captured our political systems, and they have stopped laws from being enacted that would have the stringency that is needed. That's what's happened, and that's why I chose to glue myself to the headquarters of Shell, not too far away from here, because companies like Shell, companies, the top 5, oil and gas companies, have actually spent a lot of money on greenwashing, have spent a lot of money on marketing, have spent a lot of money essentially saying, our product, which is essentially greenhouse gas emissions, is safe and we can carry on, and maybe technology will take care of it, or maybe the science is not certain enough. So I feel that's very much part of why I'm much more radical now and urge you to be bolder and recognize we are at the final moments when we can make a change to this system in a way which secures, justice, social justice, economic justice, and provides benefit to those who are vulnerable, to those who like Ella, are being impacted every day by pollution, by traffic, by congestion, who don't have any other choice but to live on those roads, really, and they don't have the means to move houses in the same way that many others in this room may do. So I think going back to one of the themes that is very present here, and being slightly nerdy, again, purpose. I'm the lady that asked that question about capitalism in the very first panel that we had. So what do you do, when you recognize that the economic system is totally failing? It's totally failing the planet. It's totally failing Noga's generation, the future generations to come. It is causing huge poverty in this country. We're at the point where, I don't know if we watched the news last night, we had confirmation that life expectancy of certain populations in certain areas in the UK is now reversing. So this system really is broken. The economic system is broken. We don't have the social welfare system to take care of it, and we don't have the politicians in charge who are going to put in place the kind of radical changes that are completely possible and are socially and economically beneficial to so many people. That is why I think you need to be bolder and you need to look at your charitable objectives. I started off in life actually as a charity lawyer, and my first job was with a company called Bates, Wells and Braithwaite, which specializes in charity law. Many companies here probably know them. And I also worked for 3 years in philanthropy. So I know that many of you are trustees, many of you will think we can't engage in these big political issues of the day. We can't talk about capitalism. That's too political. That's a hot potato. That's not for us. That's going to put everybody off. And I'm saying to you, actually, the young generation, the seasoned lawyers behind the scenes, the economists, everyone is saying the same thing. The system is broken and needs radical, major reform. And for that, we need the creative industries. You can't leave it to us, boring lawyers and scientists, anymore. We can't fix it without the imagination, without the creativity, without the collaborations that all of you can help with. And I think it's one of the mistakes, essentially, of the climate change movement that I've been a part of for 30 years, to have funded, essentially, elite advocacy and campaigns and not funded movement building, not funded local campaigns, not looked at issues from the lens of social justice. And I really hope that we can stop talking about climate change and actually just only use the words climate justice and climate injustice. That's if there's one thing that you can do, that would be better. I want to also leave on a hopeful note. I love the quote by Valerie Kerr. She's a filmmaker and an activist from America. And she said in 2017, which was quite a bleak moment for many people, what if this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? And as a mother, I feel, yes, that's a really important way of seeing what we sometimes feel is a depressing or a down period, but it can also be a moment, as winter often is, as this period in February often is, when the mycelium and underneath the soil, things are warming, things are, getting going, spring is about to happen, and literally life is about to birth itself anew. So I think it's not whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, it's to think about creativity and how in the midst of the collapse, which I think frankly is so important, bring it on, is what the Global South is saying, because this system has not worked for the countries of the Global South. It has not worked for the Pacific Islands. It has not worked for the 2 billion people who still don't have electricity. It is not working for millions of people who are being now devastated by wildfires and who are subject to land grabs. I could go on quite passionately. These are the communities and the countries that I work for. So this system wasn't working very well, and it's now very obvious to you that it's not going to work for you and your children and their children. So I think use this moment, please, to use all of the assets that you have. You have enormous assets. You have buildings, you have artists, you have creativity. Put them to use in terms of collaborations that reimagine our world and give voice and space, especially to those who are coming to the UK this year in less than 10 months and who will be looking to the UK and all of you, for some profound shift in thinking and change, and who want to be recognized and seen as the fighters and the creatives and the people who've shown resistance for the last 300 years, frankly, and have a lot of indigenous knowledge and are carrying that wisdom and that knowledge and are not putting up, are not depressed at all, actually. They're just fighting to thrive and survive in a way which I think is very humbling for me, and I'm always struck by the way in which the President of the Marshall Islands, Hilda Heine, who I was an advisor to, has carried herself and said to me that, climate change is the latest environmental sort of tragedy that has visited the Pacific. But we fought off all of the other ones and are fighting and are, trying to stay put and secure our home and our seas for future generations. So I leave you with that thought, And I hope that you will welcome the chance that COP26 gives you to create those bonds of friendship, to create those visions, to create the new kinds of collaborations, and call on every single person here to think and do something differently.
Thank you so much, Farhana, for those inspiring words. So you may remember from the morning, if you were here, that we are joined by two young people who form part of the Roundhouse Young Creatives Network. And I'm going to ask them to come on stage to share their brief reflections on the day. So we have Amal Abdi, an arts and culture writer based in London, and Phoebe Gussin, a documentary filmmaker and producer. So Amal and Phoebe, please come up. Hello. Can we just get this mic up? Great. So I'm going to ask them a couple of questions. So firstly, was there a particular moment or moments that have resonated with you both today?
Do you want to go first? Well, I think the whole day has been really informative, and like the performances as well have been amazing. I think I wanted to touch on one thing that Abel, one of the cellists, earlier said, and he was talking about how he feels like as a musician and as someone in the creative industry, he feels like he's kind of not pulling his weight sometimes. And kind of part of me agrees with him, because you feel like, you know, you're not doing enough physical and proactive kind of stuff to feel like you are making a difference. But I think as someone in the creative industry, it's really important to tell your stories, and the music we make and the films we make, and, you know, we can tell so many stories in that kind of format. So yeah, the performances have been amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like right now, what Drillminister was saying like really got me, because it is young people who are going to do it, and Noga was talking about this as well with student activism and Samzan in the morning. It's really difficult to care about like big climate problems when there's just so much more issues that are on your doorstep, and there's like homelessness and people like food banks and all that stuff, and it's so hard to like tell people to care about the climate when they have so much more to think about. But it's the only thing that like unites us all, that we're facing this challenge that's going to possibly do a lot of damage, or it's going to do a lot of damage, and we just all need to be thinking about it. But at the same time, it's really difficult when they put so much emphasis on us to do it, when it's like we're not the people who put oil in the ocean. We're not the people who like are killing the climate. It's like these big oil companies, and it's like capitalist regimes which have caused all these problems. So we have to say what we think, because policies can't change unless the people who are in power know that we don't want it anymore. And yeah.
And what would you like to say to everyone here today as a key thing for them to reflect on, or take away with them, or act on?
I think, well, one of the main things that kind of struck me today was realising the importance of collaboration and partnership and friendship as well. And I guess kind of we're so lucky in this industry because we can reach an audience that some industries just can't. So I guess, you know, a lot of people were touching on going beyond your kind of creative bubble and making collaborations with people that you wouldn't usually. Because I think one of the metaphors used earlier when I can't remember the name, but one of the artists did a piece with the string, and we all tied it together. I think that's a good metaphor of how we can all work together to kind of save this problem.
Yeah, again, I agree. I think thinking about like all the things that humans can do, instead of we are the ones who caused all the issues, but we are the only ones who can solve it as well. And thinking about the importance of cities and all this infrastructure that we can do to have like sustainable cities and model social housing to just make the planet a safer place for everyone, not just us, but also all the animals whose lives we've endangered.
Could everyone please give Amal and Phoebe a big round of applause? And now for our penultimate performance, can I please welcome onto the stage Lucia from the Serpentine Galleries.
Holly Shuttleworth from the Serpentine Galleries, come up here. You've been doing all the work. Come up.
Hi everyone, I'm the third of the Serpentine General Ecology team, and I am so honoured to be able to invite Bhanu Kapil to the stage. Bhanu is working with us on the Back to Earth 50th anniversary project. Bhanu Kapil is a poet and the Judith E. Wilson Fellow at Cambridge University. I had the pleasure of travelling to Cambridge and spending an afternoon with Bhanu and Syra Pinto, and afterwards Bhanu tweeted, and if you don't follow her, then you definitely should for moments of joy in your day. She said, "Syra Pinto plus Cambridge, tell a story which will help you build the world that you want, the sum total of all your efforts to survive, because this is the most sacred offering you can make." Please join me in welcoming Bhanu Kapil.
Hello. This is the poem I imagined that I would be reading today. Not so much. That was my arm. That was my body. I found this string on the floor. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so thirsty. This is what I wrote instead. This is how we survived, by telling the person we loved that we could not stay, by telling, then retelling the story of how the 7 girls danced on the rooftop though they had died, by hiding in a cart of hay, by hiding in the toilet of a train, by drinking alcohol, by biting someone all over their stomach, by leaving all our possessions behind, by singing the oldest song in the body, by playing LPs of the songs of Mukesh, by reciting the poetry of Jalal al-Din Muhammad Balkhi as dusk falls, by lighting a wick, by smoking opium, by returning to an ancestral village built into the side of an orchard and taking a bath by candlelight beneath the stars, by suppressing our natural gifts at all costs, by writing poems in English, by standing up and emptying a carton of plain yogurt into a bag, then adding some salt, and then an entire chicken. By banishing our fears through daily prayers and offerings to the morning sun, by gathering bitter greens by a morning stream, by fighting for the human right of other minority populations to survive, by kneading a dough on the counter for unleavened bread, by walking every morning to the Russian bookstore in Sector 17 to play chess with the owner, by beheading the first man who looked askance at our wife, by healing others with colour and light, by turning away from sources of conventional nourishment, by destroying our enemies in public debate, by setting our newborn daughters in the roots of a tree, by eating freezing cold mangoes as children and mango lassi as adults, by fighting, by marrying a light-skinned girl with money, by pretending our name was not our name, by hitchhiking from Athens to Calais, by doing whatever was asked of us, sexually and financially, by never telling anyone what happened in our house, by abandoning our family, by emigrating, by studying the plays of Christopher Marlowe in Loughborough, by choosing danger and never safety, by choosing the harbour rather than the mountains or an inland port, by cheating, by dying young, by accepting violence in all its forms as a consequence of having left our home, by loving who we loved in the way that we knew how to love them, with tenderness, with no regrets, without a coat or appropriate footwear, without the cheerful or optimistic demeanour that is interpreted mistakenly as courage. Yes, this is how I survived. This is how my mother and aunt survived. This is how my father and grandfather survived. This is who I am. And if I am writing this poem and you are reading it, and if you are playing your keyboard, and if we are listening to your music, then the world did not end. And there's no reason to read the poem I actually wrote for this occasion. Poem for the end of the world.
Thank you, Bhanu, and thank you everybody so much for being here today. It's been an extraordinary day, I think probably for everybody. It reminds me of those incredible lines by Emily Dickinson, tell all the truth but tell it slant. Because I think we've seen that today. We've seen an incredible outpouring of truth told in so many different ways by so many different voices. Taking action on climate takes many, many forms. Taking action on ecological injustice, on cultural and on climate injustice takes many forms. From what we're doing every day in our buildings, in our festivals, to the work of our artists. But there is something really critical about striking through, keeping that truthful compass and moving forward. Farhana, thank you for the exaltation again, to go further, to go faster, to get more ambitious. This is an incredibly important moment, not just for us, not just for climate negotiations, but for everything else. Everything matters. And I think that one of the, I've heard lots of words today around kinship, around love, around companionship, collaboration, but also around fear, depression, lack of agency, lack of democracy, lack of voices. This is absolutely our territory, and we need to inhabit it over the next few months and then beyond COP, because we are not sure what's going to happen at COP26. We have to ride over COP26 and take our place as stewards of this incredible planet. And I think today we've seen some of that really marvellous creative energy that we need to bring together and focus on purpose. Julie's Bicycle is here to support that journey for all of you. It's been an incredible journey for us. Please use our free tools and resources. Join the Creative Green community if you run something. We're running a clean energy campaign, and sign up. Please do sign up to the Season for Change. We want this to be an extraordinary moment. We want 10 million plus creative voices speaking out on behalf of those who, for whatever reason, cannot or will not be heard. In turn, we will work with you to amplify what you're doing. I promise you that. And the vital work and fight for recognition that is our response to this climate and ecological emergency. We need to take centre stage in a way that we have never done before. Climate and the ecological crisis is fundamentally a cultural crisis. It would be a huge abnegation of responsibility for us to falter now. It is our crisis, and we can solve it. Literally, we make tomorrow. I just need to say thank you. And although this is a list, it is a really important list. We couldn't do what we do without the generous support of all of you in this room and all of you listening, our funders, the people we work with, our collaborators, our partnerships. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to the Arts Council England, the main supporters of this event. We're really grateful for this pioneering partnership. To Sam and the Nest Collective, what a wonderful contribution you've made to today and to the world. And, of course, to Lucia and your team at the General Ecology Project at the Serpentine, a mind-boggling array of artistic interventions that just begin to crack open what this extraordinary creative voice or voices can do for us. Thank you to the Roundhouse Studios and Young Creators Network for connecting us with Amal, Phoebe and Laurie. To Sarah Corbett for curating her Change Make retreat space upstairs. I don't know if you went upstairs, but it was a really special space. To Faye Milton of Savages and Music Declares for her DJ skills that you have yet to experience. To Maddie Reed-Clark, also from Music Declares and from Famous Time Studios, who valiantly came in really late in the day to help us wrangle the tech and performance schedules. Maddie, you've been amazing wherever you are. To Lewis Jameson, also from Music Declares, who's helped all the PR and get some of these alternatives. Sorry, that's me, very aggressive. To our friends, Culture Declares Emergency, to the UK Student Climate Network, at the Climate Coalition, who are determinedly and relentlessly changing the world around us. Thank you. White Light for helping out with lights, microphones, and much more. Slido and Eventbrite for supporting the event tech needs. Seacourt and Good Energy for their ongoing support for our events programme. The V&A for offering discounts in their cafe. This was such a generous thing for all the people that we couldn't accommodate here. Thank you. The team at the Royal Geographic Society have given us far too much of their time. We've been really tricky customers, and we are really grateful. And, of course, our brilliant team of volunteers. You will have seen them around. Megan, Aline, Kat, Emma, Selina, Yambe, Elliot, Conrad, Philippa, Alison, Cyrielle, Adila, Alyssa and Maya. Wow, you are incredible. Thank you for giving us your fantastic energy. And last but most certainly not least, almost last actually, to Borough Wines, who've given us the drinks reception we're about to have, whose wine is organic, ethical and delicious. And finally, I'd like to thank our chair of many years, Tony Wadsworth, who's going to come on and finish off before the final performance. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be 2 minutes. This feels like a major moment. We have been, Julie's Bicycle was launched over 10 years, but today and this year, and we keep hearing today how this decade is so crucial, and it feels like a major moment, and I think it's been an incredible day, so thanks to all of you. But what I want to do in my 2 minutes is just to thank the Julie's Bicycle team, and obviously Alison Tickell as their leader, for their relentless commitment to driving change over the last 10 years and more. It's every day. I mean, myself and the board are genuinely in awe at what they are able to do on a very, very tight budget. We are not a rich organisation, and they make it go a long, long way. They punch so far above their weight, and they're really making an impact. And this year has been quite a year, I think it's true to say. So I just really want to say thank you to Alison and to her team, because they are incredible. And you want to give them a round of applause. Climate action is the bedrock of Julie's Bicycle's work, and always has been, because we understand that words are most meaningful if they're reinforced by deeds. We're responding to the climate and the ecological crisis isn't just a good thing to do. As far as I'm concerned, it's the only thing to do. I also want to thank Julie's Bicycle's long-term and loyal partners, the Arts Council, England, Festival Republic, Universal Music UK, the National Theatre and Warners UK, alongside the John Elliman Foundation, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, and the Polden Puckham Foundation, and everyone also who's raised funds for us through the Believe, which is a music company, if you don't know, bike ride to Brighton, without whose ongoing donations and support we wouldn't be here. There's another bike ride which you can all come to on May 13th, or you can sponsor if you can't get on your bike. And they raise really valuable funds for our work. And the final word from me is, of course, a thanks to all of you for being here, for fighting for a livable climate on a livable planet, and for all the ways in which you can take action every day. Thank you very, very much. And our final performance today is by Laurie Ogden, poet, playwright and actor, and a Roundhouse resident artist. Please welcome Laurie Ogden.
Hi, I'm Laurie. I'm from Merseyside, and also a lot of my family are from Yorkshire, which, as you'll know, big parts of that are flooded at the moment. Which is the first time I've sort of had to deal with anything being close to me. And I feel like it seems to be a theme for a lot of people today that I personally haven't done enough. And normally I write poems with a lot of stupid jokes in them. But writing on this topic hasn't really been possible to do that. So the first poem I'm going to read two today, is in direct response to climate injustice, and the second poem, I'll explain why I'm reading that. But this one is Gifts I Do Not Want to Give My Daughter. Gifts I do not want to give my daughter. A Disney action figure of every animal that no longer walks the earth. A videotape of the last orangutan signing hello, then my daughter's name, then goodbye. A plastic fish. A gas mask to keep out the thick air that trails the school route with heavy smoke fingers. The mask will be green, of course, to match her school uniform. The last drops of the last iceberg preserved in a necklace. I think this was a Christmas present. A day that gets hotter and hotter and hotter. A play date with the Earth's angry children, a hurricane, an earthquake, a tsunami, a snorkel. For when we visit the town I grew up in, now completely submerged. A world on fire. A signed confession admitting that I did not act, I did not change, I don't know why. A question mark over her future. Thank you. So this second poem is not directly about climate change, but as I'm sure we know, climate injustice at the moment is disproportionately affecting people of colour. Last year I was asked to write a piece responding to something in the news for the Barbican of March last year, of March 2018, and it was 100 years of women's rights. So I wanted to write about the suffragettes and their hunger strikes, but at the same time, the hunger strike was ongoing in Yarlswood, and so it felt wrong to be writing about one thing and not recognising what was currently going on. And I think a lot of creatives might find this when you start to try to write about something political with it in your head rather than it just kind of coming out of your gut. It's really difficult. So I used this form devised by a poet called Terence Hayes. He has an excellent poem called Nuclear, and the last word of every line is an anagram of the title. And so I've done the same thing with this poem, which is called Hunger Strike. 1918. A captive woman refuses to shrink under a prison guard's glare, rejects food, shrieks that her body is restrung as political daily, but her voice is rejected. He tugs at the corners of her clamp mouth. Repeat, reset, 200 forcefuls. There's no need to detail how he did it. Too much hurt inflicted on women is repeated. Women of grit, women on strike, painting Parliament in purple, white, and green, prisoners who would not taste anything but right. 2018. A captive woman refuses to shrink under a prison guard's glare. The guns pointed at temples are paper thin with Home Office stamps. Human rights are rugs to be yanked from underfoot. Reset, repeat. An indeterminate sentence sinks each day into dread. Nightmares are airplane shadows. Twitter sneers, I just don't really see the point in their strike. With spit the taste of shut doors, not when I'm eating my full plate of rights. Thanks very much. Thank you for having me.
A massive thanks to Laurie for joining us and for those two brilliant poems. So we are at the end. I just have two very, very final things to say. One, we do have feedback forms. Please do fill them in. We really enjoy reading them, and they're really helpful to us. You will find them in your Slido. Yes, in your Slido. That doesn't sound right, does it? But you know what I mean. They're a poll. Yes, that's right. They're a poll in Slido. Please use them. Everybody here is welcome to join us for drinks. They will be served in the main hall, so please do come, have a drink, and get to enjoy some of our evening festivities. And other than that, just a massive thank you for staying with us all day. Oh. Yes, we do have more performances, thank you, Alison, from Millicent and Faye DJing. So we've got more creativity, we've got wine, really no reason for anyone to leave just now. So a final round of applause to everyone involved in today and to you all for coming.